No.
Oh, okay. You're the banner section.
I'm doing
Yeah.
landscape.
I have some,
And
that's amazing. When they were building.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was a big deal. Coming to Oradell, this developer here.
I said, how did I?
I'm straight up finance.
It's a true name.
When you come back,
It looks like three years. So anyway,
Question about this time.
if you do, they're gonna, if it's okay, they go, if it's not decided yet, I'll tell you right then and there, like, the attorney for the board will say, he'll probably say.
Started his own business? He's doing what?
He's doing 2 videos
I mean,
and 2
22, he wanted to do the
minutes.
hardscape. I said,
saw it.
22.
I
I
saw
ain't doing,
myself
no, I
talking.
like you a lot, but I'm not, even though his price was lower.
Yeah, I'm getting prices right now. We've got 2 guys, I'm trying to get prices. I know.
This is our last project. No, if my wife said, if we're gonna start this project today, interior, shit, we're going to do.
Yeah.
Everything's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard the prices are.
They all voted yes.
I know, but on other things.
He is really good.
Yeah, I know,
He can be a
we've
professor.
always had problems with minutes.
Yeah.
He walks around our yard, that's all the trees.
Yep.
Yeah, I love listening to him. Well, I used to watch that show on TV, where they review the homes.
Yes, the restoration.
Yeah, on that show, what, yeah, what it was called, they had the young guy who was the
Yep, yep.
dumb guy asking all the questions. I love watching that
They
stuff.
abbreviate what you said, they condense what you said.
Next year, one of those full, it'll be empty when
Something
it
else,
does.
it doesn't come out that way.
You can't lose in this area of county.
No.
People can't even buy in.
How are your, do you guys do rolling taxes here? Or in Upper Center?
Do we do what?
The rolling,
No,
no.
we don't do that, but we're doing a revow for the first time we've gotten another one.
We get them every
This is
year.
rolling, yeah.
It's rolling across the, 13% increase in
Stay
taxes.
in touch with Anthony, so.
That was my hit, 13%. I was like, I said, I don't understand. The value of the house went up.
Yeah.
The rate went down.
Yes.
But it's still a difference of over 13.
That's incredible.
It's a huge number.
That's incredible. So, I've been there for 15 years.
No, I'm sorry, 23%.
That's,
It's 23%.
that's outrageous. I know who did the appraisal, because it's, they do everything.
Is it Azavino?
No, Anzavino may be your thing, but the appraisal company is Rich Albertio.
Okay.
It's got them all. I said, you're like the solid waste industry. There's only 3 like in the state. There's one for the north,
Yeah.
one for the south, and then there's that company that like has it, like Newark or Camden, they're gonna do that whole thing.
Yeah, I was shocked. My wife and I were shocked, so.
But where would you go to get a better deal? I mean, people sell their home, they're gonna get something less and pay more money.
Yeah. I mean, look, I was down in North Carolina. I lived on a golf course.
Oh, yeah, that's,
It was a 5-bedroom.
Restaurant, no,
but
your dad's thing, right?
Yeah, my dad's.
They sold it to him.
It was $350,000 house.
Correct. My nephew and his wife, she's a doctor, he's a CPA, they moved to Cary, North Carolina.
Yeah, nice one.
That's a nice town,
Yeah.
I've been there,
Cary's nice.
I checked it out.
Yeah.
I've been going to
Carry
photos of
okay.
it actually, to show the archives.
Yeah, but I wouldn't do, see, I know,
No, I know.
I go to a restaurant, there's
Yeah.
a friend, I can't,
Yeah, you can't,
Costumes are
yeah.
good in New York, I
Yeah.
go to Columbia, restaurants are great.
You just gotta be able to afford to live it.
That's true. Have you been to that new restaurant in Norfolk? That Nikos, is it the Greek thing?
I've been in Ecos, but,
No, they used to be La Petite Mac, because your office is in Norfolk.
yeah.
But
No, I haven't.
they own
That's how they
Verallis
kept
in
restaurants down
Norway.
years ago.
But no, we're in a nice part of it.
Yeah. They did a really nice job here.
Super. It's almost Instagram perfect.
Yeah.
Bring a thick one like that.
Yeah, last time I went, I just grabbed a drink with the mayor, but it's really nice.
Gorgeous. The bar,
Yeah,
looks like it could
really
be in Santa
great.
Monica.
They did a
Could
really
be in
good
LA.
job.
Is that good?
Yeah.
They went all out.
Oh, I know.
See, they're the sanitation company. I know them out of the go.
Well, I guess the mayor knew them because they came over and introduced themselves, and I kind of met
The mayor
two of
helped
the
them
guys.
big time getting all that going.
And then the chef came out and said hello.
Yes.
Yeah, very cool.
So when'd you get over here?
Yes, that's right.
Here's a true story. the mayor had his 12th wedding anniversary, so I told Chief, I want a great bottle of champagne, I picked it out. I said, he's coming tonight. He said, it won't be undue, but I'll make sure it happened. It didn't happen. I said, Mayor, how was the champagne? I called the guys. They fired him. I said, wasn't it a little severe? He gave me credit for that. I bought the champagne. I said, Nick, couldn't be the first time that guy screwed up. Why did you go from the mayor's anniversary? or whatever?
Yeah.
I don't do that often.
Oh, are we, I mean, 7:30 is when it starts. I'm not surprised they're busy, like this place is full.
I agree. I think it's good weather. I hope it's good weather. But let me go find out when you're starting, so I can home.
Yeah.
I know, I'm starting to get there. I do a lot of them. I've done less of them since I opened my own business. I was doing 3 a week. It's really hard. And now I'm doing like 3 a month. Much better. It's much better.
But she doesn't know about this tonight. I grew up in Jersey City.
My husband,
What street?
he was at, street, no.
The Heights, maybe? I grew up in the Heights.
He was down, I know, I had never been there, but his parents had, and they had moved out there, he had moved out. But you know, he used to say it's across from, it's down by,
Oh, down that way, that's,
Yeah.
downtown area, we call it,
Yeah.
And now you can't touch your roof.
and I'm not, I'm from the suburbs, I'm from West Orange.
Oh, yeah, I like West Orange.
Yeah, that's great.
And I've lived up here for, when we got married, we lived in River Edge for 4 years, and then moved to Oradell, so I'm up here about 4 years.
Wow.
I'm 45 and the house I'm in
Isn't
now.
that great? See, when you hear, see, I've been doing for 36 years, that's the way I look at it. I like to talk to people 50 years plus, because they could tell me everything about the town, and
Oh, and
you would,
how it's changed.
and you would have known people from 100 years ago because they were old, right at the time you moved in, and they would have told you everything.
Beverly Road, when we moved in Beverly Road, my sister-in-law lived, that's when this house was on. It's a little old.
It was funny. I didn't care. I said, thank you.
That's all we could afford when we came in, when it was found back then. The Greenway estates were just being built.
Built, yeah, but
We
Delia's
couldn't
farm.
afford $150,000.
Right, that was a big deal, that was a mansion to pay that
So
kind of
we
money.
ended up in Beverly Road, and then little by little, who died, who left, whatever. And then my husband and I, Barbara next door to me, which is Boston,
You know,
and then there's another little couple down the block. We're the only old people left, but it was all we could afford. And then over time, this was, when we see a home move in, it's all they
200 feet away from me.
maybe at 250, or, now we're up to, I think the one next door to me sold
Yeah, retail.
for 5, which is crazy.
Second story is supposed to be, that's 600 square feet.
They're already living on Winds, they're down
Yeah,
on
oh,
Windsor.
Windsor, that's right.
Yeah.
You
that's what
know,
I said. But
That,
they're gonna go.
what it is,
oh,
it's a cycle,
35
even on
feet
Maple
high.
Avenue,
You could put
when we moved
another
in, older people,
thing in there.
so we were, the beginning of kids, my daughter was a year old,
When
and I saw the cycle go
from.
from old to kids. Now, my kids are, and all those kids are gone, and now it's new kids again. There's, I can count 5 or 6 babies on the block already.
And what's cool about Beverly is, it's like almost a dead end, because we have popular field right down.
Right.
In fact, I knew Mrs. Hunt, she used to live on the street from my house there, with the wood.
I said,
Was it
yeah, I
Food
said,
Town or
continue
Acme?
to a
Right,
botanical
where
garden.
CVS is now. Was it Food Town or Acme?
No, you mean
Where is it?
The old,
Garden.
right
no,
where the CVS
It
was.
was like
we had-
50 Red
In the
Road.
Red Ridge? That was,
No.
Food Town, I think,
Food
maybe,
Town.
yeah. We didn't have any Acme's around here for 50 years.
we had a
Somebody has,
store
somebody,
in
maybe they
Oradell,
Yeah,
donated
you
to
had
the town
3.
as a garden.
Right.
and we had a bakery.
I can tell you it all.
I don't know if you ever seen
I've
it.
done a crash course
It's
on the
very hard
town
to
the
say.
last 2 years now.
Yes,
You had
I
a Grand
don't think
Union
you
where
Yeah.
Walgreens is now,
Walgreens
The gas
and
station.
across the street was the A&P where the dance studios
Yeah, yeah.
is.
Okay.
And out before was an A&P, that was
Wow.
Grand Union.
Okay.
And there was a Grand
So this is
Union,
it.
A&P on the corner, on the corner of where Kinder Smiles is. They kept moving around.
Right.
And,
We had a bakery.
yeah, that was the third bakery. They kept burning down.
Want to see if
Yeah.
anybody
But
else.
we had a
Yeah.
nice little town. We had a stationery store.
Yeah, Smith's.
Yes.
My kids saw the tail end of Smith's.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
They go get their little supplies for school.
and they give you free coloring books. I remember that was a big deal.
And then.
Did you ever see that?
Which one?
Smith's? When you moved in, was Smith's still there?
23.6.
You know where next,
I'm only talking about 23.6.
Yeah, no, I grew up like in Woodbridge from 1961.
Oh, well, you may have seen it.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of it.
But,
Yeah, we had a nice town. We did have a nice downtown.
by the way, there was no more stores. You know, we always had the same amount, going back to 1895.
So we just picked somebody
Yeah.
by
Passed through.
Well, that's it, yes.
got results. We didn't accept it.
Yeah, I'm here.
Should I go through the approval or just go right into the,
You got everything everybody else is always doing something goes up.
It's the little thing you don't think about.
So he's coming from a basketball game to make a quorum. He can vote the other one.
The other one,
You don't have to worry
unexpected,
about.
it's like the
We found
tetherball.
everything not much trees here. Okay.
Hello.
Oh, yes.
are we ready?
Oh, yeah, yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, March 5th. It's roughly 7:42 p.m. This is the special meeting of the Planning Board. Notice of this meeting was published in the official newspaper, prominently posted in Borough Hall, and filed with the clerk's office in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Mr. Deputy, can you have roll call?
Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Here. Mr. Kang.
Here.
Mr. Scalcione.
Here.
Mayor Koth.
Here.
Mr. Darian.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Scalzione, will you lead us? Sure. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, I'd like to comment to members of the audience. Thank you for coming. Unfortunately, we're going to need a recess for the next couple of minutes. We are waiting on another board member, and without this board member, we would not be able to have a majority vote or a quorum during the voting process. So I anticipate the recess to be about 30 minutes. Do I have a motion to go into recess?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And we apologize for this delay, but we just can't. Our hands are tied.
I see another name.
For the statement account. You're welcome, thank you.
This, got two copies of the zoning. That's why.
Housing plan? There's no ordinances for.
But I didn't understand the restoration.
It isn't here.
So that's so
So then you have to recuse yourself. And then as soon as you recuse yourself. So we needed another.
right. Yeah.
Or the same night as like we did last time. This way you get all the people here and then they can hang out.
Me? You're so you're talking about.
I'm talking about Soldier Hall,
Correct.
along Kindergarten,
Right.
on the west side of Kindergarten.
Right. Yeah.
Two houses next to Bank of America, that's in line. Here's my house. That was gonna come up. I Chase Bank, he said, I know this. This is gonna be a mess.
Because some of the things now is just
I'm not kidding. And I try to stay away from it now. Because there have been times when I'm maybe sometimes it's more we're on to make the dog cancer.
Back to that area. That's
you have to work with these other parts.
And then license holders.
to nominate small municipalities and have a regional, and it will start to grow as a city. So they would have more control. Watch your step.
Jeff, do you want the three of us here? I thought so.
You think so? Mr. Forte's here. Can you start?
Who wants to? Who wants these?
You have a list of the email that you sent me, listing of all the ordinances.
Not printed.
Let me just look at your computer. Actually, it might be here. I can get into my emails. Thought you were out, huh?
Are we ready? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for waiting, and we apologize for the delay. Could I have a motion to come back into session?
So moved.
Second? Second. Thank you. I'd like to make a note that Michael Forte is in attendance. Mr. Depkin, can you add that to the roll?
Yes.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is approval of planning board minutes for February 3rd. I believe they were included in your packet. Does anyone have any comments or additions or suggestions regarding the minutes? Having seen none, do I have a motion to approve the planning board minutes for February 3rd?
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have no correspondence tonight. Tonight's a special meeting. The next item is to review the amendments to the Oradell housing element and fair share plan and to ensure consistency with the borough's master plan.
Chairman, I have to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and tonight we have both Caroline Ryder and Jeff Seranian and Francis Reiner. All three individuals worked on our fair share housing plan. Just from the outside looking in, I was not directly involved in the crafting of this plan, but I know that it was extremely hardworking, and there was a very short timeline. So I commend you for all your time and your effort. And I know that this particular plan was different than the prior rounds 1 through 3, and it was very difficult to get to this point. So I'd like to thank you. And with that, I guess, Mr. Seranian, would you like to walk us through the housing plan?
Guess I'll sit. Can you hear me? Do I need to talk about it?
That's behind, right behind you.
Okay. All right. So my name is Jeff Seranian. I'm an expert in affordable housing law in New Jersey, affordable housing law. My firm is Seranian, Edwards, Buzak, and Nolan. Last count, we represented over 100 towns across the state. This is primarily what we do. This is everything that I do and have done for almost over 40 years. So I think that what would make sense is, let me give you a brief background of the legislation that brings us here today and where we are in the process that the legislature created. And then I can go into what are we doing and why are we changing the plan that was adopted in June of 2025, and hopefully make more sense to the public. So March 2024, Governor Murphy signs an amendment to the Fair Housing Act into law that made radical changes to the legislation. It established a process for determining the fair share for round 4, and it provided that the obligation was cumulative. So whatever your obligation was for the rounds 1, 2, and 3, round 1 started in 86, round 2 started in 94, round 3 was a very lengthy period between the end of round 2 and 2025 and 2015. And so now we're in round 4. And so what this new law did is it said, here's the way that you determine your obligation for round 4, and here's what you have to do to satisfy your obligation. So I personally went to every hearing because I thought it was horrible legislation and said so. But it was predetermined that this was going to be blasted through, and they got it through. So this is a hand that's been dealt to us, and we have to do our best with that hand. Now, what this legislation did was it abolished the New Jersey Council on Affordable Housing, the entity, COA, that most people are aware of, that decided what the rules were in rounds 1, 2, and 3 based upon the Fair Housing Act that was adopted in 1985. So it got rid of COA, and it created this new process. And in this new process, if you wanted protection from developers that would sue you and try to get a builder's remedy, you had to file a declaratory judgment action in January of 2025, and then you had to commit to a number, and it's not like you had much room to debate the number. The statute was so restrictive that this is your number, and there's very little opportunity to change it. And then you had to commit to adopting a plan by June of 2025. So to its credit, Oradell filed that lawsuit in January, and it delivered a plan in June of 2025. And by so doing, it insulated itself from anyone who would sue it and try to leverage it and get what's called the builder's remedy, where they really try to jack up the densities mercilessly, shamelessly, and say, okay, I'll do 20% set aside. So we did what we needed to do to protect the town. As we were formulating that plan that was due by the end of June, on June 10th, we got a letter from the representative of 800 Kinderkamak. And the letter said, we want to be part of your plan. And we have an obligation under the Fair Housing Act to consider the proposal of anyone that expresses a commitment to provide affordable housing. So we responded by saying, look, we'll consider this, but we have this June 30th deadline, and we're not going to be in a position to consider this before June 30th. And we don't want to consider your site in isolation. We want to consider your site in the context of that corridor. And so that's what we said in the June plan. And when we filed the plan in June, the next phase of the process was developers could file objections. We got 4 objections, and then Fair Share Housing Center objected. And each one wanted more than the next. You know, by way of example, Avalon wanted a project at 59 units an acre. And so all these developers came in, and all of these developers gave us their wish list, and we had to negotiate with each of them through this mediation process that ended in December 31st of 2025. We ended up negotiating an agreement. The other thing that I would point out is in this phase of the process, there is a retired judge that's a member of what's called the program that oversees the mediation, and this program judge has as his assistant what's called an adjudicator. And so Judge Bookbinder was the program judge, and the adjudicator he had was Beth McManus. Beth McManus is an expert planner in affordable housing. And this judge appropriately said, I'm going to rely very heavily on this adjudicator and what I decide and what I don't decide, or what I dismiss. And so he brought in Beth McManus, who worked with him and oversaw all this mediation. And by the end of December, we had worked out a deal with one of the 5 objectors, 445 Kindermack. 445 Kindermack came in. They wanted 40 units. We worked on an agreement where we limited them to 25. But over the course of this period, we were dealing with the likes of Avalon that was seeking 59 units an acre. We spoke to all of them. We had an obligation to speak with all of them. We didn't make an agreement with anyone else, but we negotiated with all of them. And so we ended mediation on December 31st with one agreement and with a adjudicator's report that made a number of recommendations based upon voluminous objections by all the developers and Fair Share Housing Center, and in fairness, a voluminous response by me and my team. Okay, we stood up to them, and we did quite well insofar as the adjudicator was persuaded by many of our arguments, because the Fair Share Housing Center was taking positions that were very unreasonable. For example, Fair Share was taking the position that you have to satisfy your whole unmet need, where there's like 100 settlements I can point to where they accepted less. Okay, and so the adjudicator, the emperor has no clothes. No, you don't have to satisfy your whole unmet need. And so while it wasn't everything we wanted, it certainly wasn't 59 units an acre and what the developers were looking for. And so the adjudicator issued her report, and then at that point, the judge was supposed to make his recommendation, because these judges are part of the executive branch, not part of the judiciary. So they can only make recommendations to the judiciary, because the next phase of the process is the county judge. Okay, so Judge Bookbinder took his time to make his recommendation, and he finally issued his recommendation mid-February 2026. And on one hand, he said that he acknowledged the agreement with 445, and he dismissed all the other objections. But on the other hand, he said, he set forth the reasons for his decision, he suggested that there needed to be an agreement either with THG, who's Hakimian, or with Avalon. That's not what the master, the adjudicator, had recommended, but that's the position that the judge took. So we found ourselves in a situation where the legislation that we were dealing with created this March 15th deadline, and we didn't have the decision of the program judge. So we did what I recommended, which is, let's just do what we said we would do in mediation and let the chips fall where they may. If some point along the way we work out an agreement, we can do that, but we didn't want to let our guard down
for that March 15th deadline because we knew that if we did, the vultures are circling, they would descend on us. So our mission was to get this done in a timely way. Now, in order to formulate an amendment to the plan that we filed in June that was responsive to all that we had, which was the report of the adjudicator, we did certain things. One thing that we did in this amendment.
Jeff, if I may interrupt.
Sure.
So before we get into the, it looks like you're going into the specifics of what we put together for the plan. I just wanted to recap for members of the audience and then for anyone watching. So from a procedural standpoint, round 3 versus round 4. Round 4 is the one we just went through. There were significant differences.
Yes.
Can you highlight the significant changes between round 3s and round 4 and why round 4 is so special?
Yeah. When a town doesn't have enough land to meet its obligation, it can secure what's called a vacant land adjustment. And it can adjust that number down to a number that's called the realistic development potential, the RDP, or the adjusted number. All means the same thing. And you have an obligation to create a realistic opportunity for your realistic development potential. It's a hard number, okay? And the unmet need is more hopes and dreams. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, you're not going to die and go to hell. And the law on unmet need was crystal clear in round 3. You just have to have a meaningful effort, and you're not held to the same standard by a long shot.
Jeff, in round 3 for Oradell, we met our realistic development potential.
Yes,
is that
you
correct?
did. Your realistic development potential was 7, and you exceeded your realistic development of 7. And you set forth a bunch of mechanisms to address the unmet need, and the court approved those mechanisms. Okay? So when you look at our plan from June of 2025, we divided the world into 2 pieces. 1 through 3, we had a judgment of repose where Fair Share Housing Center was a party that was approved in a duly noticed proceeding. And we relied heavily on that. This is what we were obligated to do. We did it. Okay? And then we talked about round 4 separately. Now you asked about what's the difference between round 3 and round 4. Well, in round 3, the law was crystal clear that you don't have an obligation to create a realistic opportunity for your unmet need. That's why it's unmet need and why it's not realistic development potential. But what changed in round 4 is there's language in the legislation that there's a dispute about. And Fair Share Housing Center interpreted that language to mean that you have to provide realistic zoning for 25% of your unmet need for round 4. I took the position based on the plain language of the statute that no, it's 25% of your RDP for round 4. But we knew that we weren't going to be able to get through this process and get a favorable recommendation from the trial judge unless we did in fact provide a realistic zoning for that 25% of the unmet need for round 4. So while we reserved all our rights, and while we said, look, we're right, and everyone else is wrong about what the statute means, we said it's moot because our plan does provide realistic zoning for 25% of the unmet need for round 4, which is a number close to 50, like between 45 and 50. Okay, so that's the difference between round 3 and round 4. In round 3, there was no obligation to create a realistic opportunity for your unmet need. That's why it was unmet need. In round 4, there's language in the statute that says you have to provide realistic zoning for something. I interpret it one way, Fair Share Housing Center interpreted it another way. Our plan addressed it so that even if I'm wrong, that our position is the court should approve our plan.
Now, also in round 3, you negotiated directly, the municipality directly negotiated with the Fair Share Housing Council and basically the state, the COA.
Yeah, Fair Share Housing Center was the only entity that came to the table in round 3. In round 4, you suddenly became the most popular municipality in the state, and all these developers came out of the woodwork and started hammering you.
And we had to take that into account when we were negotiating this time
Had to
around.
deal with it. We couldn't just say, we couldn't do what we wanted. You know, if it was up to us, we would have had a very different plan for like the northern end of Kinderkamak than what we could achieve in mediation, or what we could achieve in this process that we were bound to.
And those rules were as a direct result of the amendment to the housing law back in March of
Yes.
2024.
Yes. The amendment to the Fair Housing Act, that is an abomination, in my opinion.
Okay.
But that's the hand that's been dealt with us.
And so when we negotiated round 4, we worked with the state, we worked with Fair Share Housing Council, and we also worked with 3 developers. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know who, I wasn't around for round 3.
I'm sorry, round 4. Did I say round 3?
Well,
I meant
yeah.
in round 4.
In round 4, four developers
Four
and
developers
Fair Share Housing Center.
and Fair Share.
That's who we had to mediate with.
So it was a much bigger table, and there were a lot more people on the other side, and they had a lot more power and
They
weight.
had deep pockets. They filed voluminous objections. You know, they came armed and loaded, and we defended the town.
Okay.
And we tried to manage the risk. They were coming over the hill, and if they had their druthers, they'd decimate the town. We had to fight for something much more temperate than 59 units an acre, by way of example. So we achieved that in large measure in that the adjudicator was sympathetic to this a lower density of 28 to 30 units per acre, as opposed to these high numbers that Avalon was pressing. Okay, but so where that left us, and the reason why we're here tonight, is we have to meet, the statute says that you have to adopt all the ordinances and all the resolutions that are contemplated by your plan by March 15th. So we couldn't wait till February 17th when Judge Bookbinder issued his recommendation. We had to get going. We had to get cracking. We were never going to meet that deadline. And as day follows night, we would have all these builders' remedy lawsuits on March 16th, and they all would have been wagging their fingers saying, the statute said you had to do this all by March 15th, and you didn't. So what we ended up doing is we ended up marching ahead and preparing an amendment to the plan that was responsive to what the judge's expert was saying she thought would be acceptable. And the amendment to the housing element and fair share plan before you tonight represents what we believed would be acceptable to the adjudicator based upon the report she issued in this process. Okay? She subsequently amended the report, but I think it's still consistent. We still have issues even after we get through with all of this, but at this point, the focus is meeting that March 15th deadline and trying to defend ourselves from the developers that in every Mount Laurel case, they paint the town as recalcitrant and they try to create these false images of a town that's against affordable housing. And so
Jeff,
we've
sorry.
deflated that narrative.
So Jeff, if I could once again summarize, we are meeting a procedural deadline of March 15th, right?
Yes.
Did I get the date right?
Yes.
I keep saying May, sorry. And I didn't even
I
make a
wish it
mistake.
was May.
So procedurally, we have to make all this work has to be done by March 15th.
Yeah.
And if we don't, procedurally, then that opens us up to a builder's remedy
Right.
suit. Now, what is builder's remedy and why is it important?
Builder's remedy is a developer coming in and saying, you zone my site non-residential, you zone my site residential, 1 unit per acre. I want 10 units an acre. I want 50 units an acre. And I'll make 20% of them affordable, but that's what I want. And when a town is complying voluntarily, as we are, you're given a lot more deference than if you're not complying voluntarily and you're subject to a builder's remedy. The best way to describe a proposal of a developer in a builder's remedy lawsuit is shameless. And that's not exaggeration. it's shameless. And then towns have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to get it from shameless to hold your nose and do whatever you have to do. But you don't want to expose yourself to builder's remedy lawsuits. Now, just so the record is clear, there are things I have in mind for how we could try to buy more time in the event that there is a challenge. But the best course of action is let's meet this deadline and try to get some more room to, if we need to make further changes down the road.
Thank you.
So that's a big picture. But if it's time for me to get into the
Yes.
specifics of the amendment, I will. So over the course of mediation, there were separate sites. There was 66 Kinder Kamak, which is the old Subaru site. There is 699 Kinder Kamak, the mansion. There is 690, 700 Kinder Kamak, one of the giant office buildings at the north end of town, and 800 Kinder Kamak, the giant office at the very end of town. All of them and 445 Kinder Kamak. And so what we ended up doing is, as to 445, we negotiated an agreement. They wanted 40, we wanted 15. We negotiated at a number of 25. And we got certain things in there from an aesthetic perspective that were important to us. We have an agreement that's been recommended for approval. As to 66 Kinder Kamak, the adjudicator made clear that we couldn't ignore it, even though we won the litigation about the zoning board's denial of the variance. She said it's vacant, we can't ignore it. And so we had it in the June 25 plan as an overlay site. She indicated that if we just remove the overlay so that the Mount Laurel use was the only use, that would be permissible. It would generate an obligation, but it would satisfy the obligation it generated. So between 445 Kinder Kamak and 66 Kinder Kamak, our RDP went to 7 for round 4, but it was satisfied with the sites that generated that obligation. Then the rest was unmet need. And 699 challenged us, and our position as to 699 was their site contributed to the RDP, to the adjusted number in round 3. And the rules are, once you get an adjustment, you're free to satisfy that number however you want, and if you find a way to satisfy that number without using the site, that you're permitted to zone that site however you choose. So when we fast forward to round 4 and 699 came in, started demanding all kinds of density, we said, we bought the right to zone your site the way we wanted by satisfying the RDP your site generated in round 3. And the adjudicator agreed with that analysis, in addition to other arguments we had. So we did not change the zoning on that site. Our round 3 plan, we had indicated that we would effectively expand the overlay that we had in round 2 by giving certain development rights on certain sites. And so part of the process of mediation is we cut back somewhat on how much was expanded of what we went in with our round 3 plan. So another ordinance before you tonight has an overlay zone on some but not all of the sites that were flagged for overlay zones in the plan that we filed in June of 2025. Okay, and then the big issue in this process was what are we doing with the zoning on 690, 700, and 800 Kinderkamak? And our position is we want that developed in a uniform way. We don't want one ordinance for 690, 700 and a different ordinance for 800. We want some measure of uniformity. And so our position was, well, we'll have zoning, and if they're acceptable, great. If it's not acceptable, we'll defend it that it's realistic zoning. So we went in with zoning that we thought was responsive to the concerns that the adjudicator had expressed in her report. And that's what you have tonight. We went in with what we thought would be acceptable to the adjudicator and what we offered up in mediation as a way of maintaining some measure of control over the destiny of this community, the zoning destiny of this community. And the judge, on the one hand, agreed and dismissed all the objections other than 445 where he acknowledged the settlement, but on the other hand said, in order to have realistic zoning for 25% of the unmet need for round 4, you got to make a deal with Hakimian or you got to make a deal with Avalon. So I don't agree with that, but that's what he said. So we still have issues even after we make this March 15th deadline that we need to resolve. And so, but for tonight, we just need to get to March 15th. We need to deliver on what we promised in the mediation process. And if we don't, the developers get stronger. So that's it. I don't know if, I should say that we brought in Fran to give us a vision for 690, 700, and 800 Kinderkamak. It was a very sensible vision, really thoughtful vision. But, and that's what we negotiated with. But the developers were coming in with something radical. And so we weren't able to get our way with what Fran had envisioned. But at least we got a lot.
You want me to walk through 690, 700, and 800, or do you want Carolyn to walk through?
I think you should both walk through. I think you should walk through that part, and I think you should maybe, if you want to elaborate on any other part of the plan.
So I think we should just talk about the plan for a few
Yeah,
minutes before we get to work.
absolutely.
Can everyone
good.
hear me okay? Are you picking me up?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me?
No, you sit on.
You can have a microphone.
Here. Can I put this here?
Yeah.
Is this better?
Yes.
That's better? You can hear me? So, okay. So, Jeff really went through the plan. He went through the whole process, and he touched on the the plan as amended before you. And this board's role is several things you need to that are on the plate for tonight. But one of them is adopting the plan. It's amending your master plan to adopt this plan, the housing element and fair share plan. The housing element is a component of your master plan, and this is an amendment to the plan. So he really went through everything that's in the plan, the changes in the RDP, and the unmet need that was necessary to address the requirements. So I don't know if there are any specific questions from the board on that. I feel like we have a number of ordinances and other things to get through tonight. I can spend some more time, or
Carol, I just have one for clarity. So the board adopted this plan in June, correct?
Correct.
And tonight, we're being asked to consider amending the plan that was previously adopted.
Correct.
So we're not coming with a whole new plan from scratch.
Correct.
What came out of the discussions in mediation has necessitated amending the plan that was previously approved.
That's correct.
Right, so it may make sense to focus more on some of the changes that we were forced to incorporate into the amendment that you're presenting for our consideration tonight, if that makes sense.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to do that. Jeff touched on a lot of them, but I can spend a few minutes going through that if you'd like. So as Jeff indicated, we had several challenges to the June plan that were filed by developers and Fair Share Housing Center. The borough worked diligently in review and discussion and analysis, and with the adjudicator, Ms. McManus, as Jeff did indicate. And what really came out of this process is what Jeff has described, but I will go through it again with you. First of all, as you know, you are what is known as a vacant land community. That means that the municipality does not have enough land to build or to zone for its obligation. You are a vacant land community in round 3, so it should be no surprise you continue to be a vacant land community. Our analysis in the June plan resulted in an RDP of 3 units. That has now been increased to 7, from 3 till 7. And Jeff touched on it. The RDP initially in the June plan was 3 units based on our analysis of 445 Kinderkamak. They were one of the challengers. They indicated they wanted 40 units. We started out with 15 units, which is how we came to the 3-unit RDP. And through a process, there was a settlement at 25 units. But 25 is the total units, so 20% of that is the RDP of 5. The other property that came up for discussion with respect to the RDP, as Jeff indicated, was 66 Kinderkamak Road, the site of what was the former Subaru site. This property is, I guess, now vacant or fairly close to being vacant, just a few improvements. Even though the zoning board did deny that application, the adjudicator believed that there should be an RDP on that site, and there was an RDP established of 2 units for that property. And so 2 units on 66 Kinderkamak, 5 units on 445 Kinderkamak, 5 plus 2 equals 7, so we have a 7-unit RDP for round 4. By coincidence, you also had a 7-unit RDP for rounds 1 through 3. That's just a coincidence. There's nothing more than that. So but with the vacant land adjustment, the remainder of your obligation does not go away, as we've indicated before. So you have a 7-unit RDP. You had a total obligation in round 4 of 180. 80, yes, 180 minus 7 equals 173. That's your unmet need. There is this new 25% rule, and Jeff did indicate some of the different interpretations of it. Regardless, based on the challenges and the resulting mediation and work that was all done, there was overlay zoning recommended for certain sites, some of which you'll hear about tonight, all of which, you'll hear about tonight. One is for the property that Fran referenced, 800, 700, and 690 Kinderkamak Road. The other are the properties, portion of what was, generally speaking, the B3 zone being rezoned to B1, because the B1 zone carries with it the CBD overlay. The CBD, Central Business District, is a court-approved round 3 unmet need mechanism, which allows for a mixed use with a multifamily and inclusionary component. So that is I'm really I'm very much shrinking the discussion on the plan, but I feel like we had a great introduction, and those are the changes that came from this process that Jeff has described. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I'll ask one question specific to 66. So what changed there is that if it were B1 with an overlay, somebody could develop as a commercial,
right,
but not be required to include residential on the second floor. And what the adjudicator asked us to do was to say, don't have it as an option. We'd like to
Right.
see that developed as first floor commercial with a second floor of residential.
Right, that's-
Consistent to what the overlay would allow, but since you have the site and it's vacant, that should be used towards meeting your number.
Yeah.
That's exactly what,
Right.
that's very similar to the discussion that ensued, yes, that's correct. With the overlay zone allows the option for the underlying zoning as well. This essentially removes it. When you have the zoning just, that only allows the, the inclusionary, or in the case of 66, the mixed-use inclusionary. So what is happening, in addition to the plan, or to implement the plan, is there's a series of ordinances that were proposed and that the council heard on first reading at its last meeting last week on Tuesday, the week before. It's been heard on first reading and referred, like any land use ordinance, to this board for what's called a consistency review. And that will be done. That's the next steps. But there are multiple ordinances for consideration. I can run through quickly.
Before you do that, I do have a question about
Of course.
the change in the June versus this version of the fair share plan. You mentioned here a 20% set aside. Do we approve that past June, or was this new? I thought it was 15, 20, depending on rental versus purchase.
That's a great question. So you're correct in that in round 3, what Oradell did, and was very typically done, was that inclusionary developments where the affordable units were rentals had a 15% set aside, and the set aside is that portion that is set aside as affordable units. So, and then the rentals would be 15% set aside, and the for sale units would have a 20% set aside. However, now in round 4 with the vacant land community, generally speaking, it's a 20% set aside across the board, unless there is a certain situation, that some sort of other agreement. But yes, you're correct.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up. So now the ordinances that are.
Should we talk about the ordinance? Should we vote on those first?
No, I run through the ordinances because they're part of the plan as well.
Go ahead, Carolyn. Sorry, I just had a question.
No, sure. There are several ordinances that have been introduced as in an effort to implement this plan and that are required. The first one is Ordinance 26-01. It's a new affordable housing and development fee ordinance. This is based on a state template. It is, I think, 42 pages long, if I'm correct, 35, 40, 45 pages, somewhere in that. Every municipality participating in this process is adopting something like this because of new rules that were adopted by the state in December. Ordinance 26-02 rezones 445 Kinderkamak Road, which is the property with which the borough has settled. That ordinance would allow 25 total units, of which 20% would be affordable. Ordinance 26-03 rezones 66 Kinderkamak Road, which is what we just discussed. It's taking the overlay and taking the overlay zone and basically making it the only permitted use. Ordinance 26-4 rezones the rest of the B3 zone to a B1 zone. The reason for doing that is that the B1 zone carries with it the CBD overlay, which is has the inclusionary component. Ordinance 26-5 rezones 800, 700, and 690 Kinderkamak Road. Ordinance 26-6 changes the set-asides in the overlay zone. That is the very brief description of all of them. I was involved in the preparation of all of them except for 26-5, which is 800, 700, and 690 Kinderkamak. That was what Fran worked on. So I don't know how much in-depth you want to get with them, or if you want to hear from Fran about, that's a 17 acres of that area.
Sure. Okay, so you got enough information yet?
There's more.
So you have an ordinance in front of you, 26-5, which is for the rezoning of 690, 700.
Fran, they can't hear you.
690, 700, and 800 Kinnekumak Road. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to the ordinance and the uses and the bulk standards in terms of the process. And I know Jeff talked a little bit about this, but since it's a lot of information, I think it's okay to reiterate a little bit of it. As was indicated on June 30th, the borough adopted its fourth round housing and spending plan. And then objectors, property owners, and interested parties had until August 30th to file an objection on any property based on the plan that was adopted in June. And so, as Jeff mentioned, there were 4 objectors and the fair share, and 2 of the objectors were identified by Jeff. One being Avalon Bay, which was 690 and 700, which is roughly a 7.2 acre site, and the other, the Kemian development, which was the 10 plus acre site, which is 800. And so, as a part of that objection on and before August 30th, they submitted plans of what they wanted to propose on the 2 sites. And then from September 1st through the end of December was a series of ongoing negotiations, conversations, Zoom calls with the adjudicator and the judge, trying to determine what was appropriate from a design standpoint, from a density standpoint for the borough. And so one of the things that we did initially on behalf of the borough is to look at the underlying zoning of the 690, 700, and 800, which is in the B2 zone. So we looked at the bulk standards of the underlying zoning, which, just by way of brief information, 3-story is the height limit for buildings in the B2 zone, maximum building coverage of 40%, maximum lot coverage of 75%, and then there were front yard setbacks and side yard setbacks. So we did an analysis of the underlying zoning and said to ourselves, if residential was permitted, what could you reasonably build in terms of the density based on the underlying zoning? In other words, the zoning represents a box. What can we fit in the box if residential was permitted, because we're going through this affordable housing process? What we were able to determine was that the underlying zoning would permit roughly 24 units an acre based on the bulk standards of a 3-story building with a 40% building coverage and a 75% lot coverage. And we offer that back as a negotiating piece to the adjudicator and the judge as a part of that process. And through a series of additional conversations, the adjudicator made it very clear to us that those were not acceptable from a development standpoint, and had made suggestions, and strong suggestions, I would say, to increase the density, increase the height, increase the building coverage by a little, and the impervious coverage by a little. And so when we started this process, as Jeff had indicated, the judge was very clear in that he was going to follow the advice of the adjudicator. And so through these conversations that we had with both of them, and then separately with just the adjudicator, it was clear to us that we couldn't have stood on the grounds of what the bulk standards of the underlying zoning permitted. We had to kind of meet the minimum requirements that the adjudicator had indicated in these conversations. And so the ordinance you have in front of you really is a culmination of those conversations and us as professionals trying to protect the borough to the best that we can in terms of limiting the amount of density that could be developed on the sites. And so you have zoning for all 3 sites that allow for multifamily residential. It allows for also some other uses, commercial, medical, and retail uses. It has a density of 28 units per acre, with a provision to allow up to 30 units an acre if some commercial, office, retail is provided as part of the design. We increased the maximum building coverage from 40% in the underlying zoning to 45% in the proposed zoning. We increased the lot coverage from 75% in the underlying zoning to 80% in the zoning, and we increased the height from the 3 stories, 35 feet, to 4 stories, 48 feet. all the rest of the information is really minutia, but I just thought it was important for you to understand that the process that we went through was not us coming up with a plan and then saying this is the plan we want. It was about us trying to generate the lowest amount of development that we felt we could reasonably defend, and then through the process of conversations with the adjudicator and the judge, made it clear that we had to increase what we had come up with. And so the adjudicator's ultimate recommendation had indicated that 28 units an acre was the minimum that was acceptable. And so we believe that we have met that requirement, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about the ordinance specifically.
I have a question. So I just want to restate what you had stated, kind of like a simplistic perspective or point of view, which is we have existing buildings on the site. The existing buildings are commercial. We're getting a lot of pressure under the new round 4 affordable housing negotiations by these property owners to change the use of the site. We initially, our opening negotiation was we'll keep the size of the buildings the same, the lot coverage the same, and we'll allow them to introduce residential. And their response was, no, that's not going to work. And the adjudicator agreed with them. So it looks like, we could want something in that area, but odds are it's not going to happen that way. Is that correct?
Yeah, I want to clarify a little bit about what you said. So we developed through our analysis what the minimum amount of residential that could be developed based on the underlying bulk standards,
Right.
which we believed was around 24 units an acre. Jeff had indicated, which I was a part of these conversations, Avalon Bay came in with 59.
Right.
We certainly didn't, the adjudicator didn't say, yeah, 59 is great, we want 59. We worked hard to make sure that 59 was not something that anybody believed was viable from a design standpoint, from a planning perspective. And so the adjudicator didn't say that they couldn't necessarily recommend what we had in our initial zoning was, but we went from 24 to 28 as opposed from 24 to the 59 that they were requesting.
Right. And lot coverage, building lot coverage went from 40 to 45%, which is a very small amount. And the maximum lot coverage, including parking lots and other hard surfaces, went from 75% to 80%. So,
yeah, and there was and the 3 stories went to 4 stories, and there was a number of conversations, discussions about those properties being substantially lower in terms of if you're on the building with a parking lot, that is substantially lower than Kinnickmack Road. So we argued that the 3 stories was what the zoning permitted. The counter argument that the adjudicator, I think, ultimately sided with was that since Kinnickmack Road was so much higher, that a 4-story building was in effect going to look like a 3-story building.
Right. So, I mean, in terms of, if I were to summarize Ordinance 26.5, it is not the most minimum because that would be based on what's existing. But other than that, it's a very, very conservative approach to these properties, and it is far short of what these objectors want. So I just want to kind of, we have to approve these ordinances, but I want to provide some sort of overall scale of what we're approving. And if on one side is what we currently have, and on the other side is what Avalon Bay has, we're pretty much right next to what we currently have, is what we're saying.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Or any comments? Okay. Would you like to bring up anything else that we should consider regarding these ordinances?
No.
Okay, thank you.
You should go through them one at a time.
No.
Okay. I guess at this point, I'd like to open it up to the public for public comment regarding the plan, our fair share housing plan, or regarding any one of the ordinances. We'll leave as much time as possible for everyone to speak. If we start running into too many people, we might put a time limit on it, but I'll leave that up to Mr. Depkin.
Thank you.
So would anyone from the audience who wants to speak come to the podium? State your name, please. And
Paul Atsunis. I'm beautiful Beverly Road. Have something that I wanted to clear up. I've been speaking about it. Nobody ever said anything to me about it, and it's this piece of legislation that was passed on February 25th, and it was signed by Governor Murphy. And it states in here that, and it pertains to 26.3, and it states that if you make housing on contaminated or pre-contaminated land, affordable housing would not give us credit for those apartments. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention because I saw it, I got it, I did some research and I found it. And I just want to bring that to your attention because I think it's important. Let me get my glasses. The other stuff that I wanted to talk about and is all on 26.3 because I'm a resident that got the notice in the mail that I'm within 200 feet. And this is something that I wrote up here. It says establishing a special AH4 Affordable Housing Zone 4. Now, I looked at the draft and it calls out one ground story of commercial and a second story of residential, which is nice. I agree with it. And I know that you worked very hard to do this. And the only problem is it says 35 feet height for the building. And unfortunately, from what I had learned from the previous developer that tried to build on that site, the 35 feet, the developer would say that they can make 3 stories out of it. And that would at least double the residential housing, which might be beneficial to the town, but I don't think it's beneficial to the neighborhood. So it's a loophole for the developer. Now, also, even though the master plan calls for a 15-foot buffer between commercial buildings and residential, it is not included in the ordinance. And it is in the master plan. And the 26.3 calls for a 10-foot rear yard, and I'd like to have that changed to make it 15 feet to follow the master plan. Now, I know that something that's in the master plan, if it's not in the ordinance, doesn't mean anything. So that's why I'm saying we need a change for this. Because I need a buffer zone from residential homes abutting this property. Now, also, the problems that we had before also are going to come up again. We worked on this for 2.5 years. Kind of took a lot out of me, and I'm still going with it because I'm in too deep. So, the parking, should be to enter and egress to parking on the property should be called out from Kinderkamack Road, from and to Kinderkamack Road. The residents didn't want this then either. They didn't want to have a side street on Argyle where there would be more traffic, because that's where most people try to get off on Argyle, because that's the best place where you get a good view of the parade of cars coming down Kinderkamack Road. And if we have more traffic there, it hinders us, because the other one on Berkshire is already hindered by a parking from the veterinarian business that's there. And then some people also, not only that, on the no parking sign they park there too sometimes. And also we have trucks that park there next to the stop sign. So it's pretty hard, and that place is really hard to see, especially for the cars coming from the north, coming south. And you have to make that left turn. It's very difficult. So establishing it as a B1 business district will require a reduction also in the speed limit. Because if it's a B1 business district, it should be 25 miles an hour, just like it is in town. And we're going to have a lot of stores there and more traffic. So we need to lower that speed limit. And we had lowered it from 35 to 30, which I was involved in that, because I brought that up because River Edge was 30, and then we were going to 35 for like 3 blocks, and then it goes down to 25. So I think we should continue 25 miles an hour, Planning Board. I'm saying this to you now. The other thing is that people aren't, the traffic isn't really paying attention to people crossing the street. And
Paul?
The flashing light goes on.
Paul?
Yeah.
We have to keep our comments, related to these ordinances.
Okay.
please.
Well,
Thank you.
that's it. That I just wanted to ask for a push button light, red light, for that, and that's it. I said my piece, but I just want you to think I'm not against what you guys came up with. I know you worked very hard on it, and I agree with you. But I have to look out for my area where I live. And that's why I'm doing this. And I've been doing this for now 3 years. And so I hope that you will take some of my comments serious, and especially the one about the contaminating property. And I actually have it here, but I don't have another one to give out.
I see it?
I can show it to you.
Yeah, I'll give it back to you.
Let me see if I got it.
I'll give it back.
There you go.
I don't know what you saw that.
A little bit of coffee stain on there.
That's all right.
Thank you, Paul.
I am
Okay.
familiar with this because we handled the zoning board denial. It was
Would anyone else like to speak?
it's contaminated. No. Can I take a look at the legislation?
Yeah, I was going to take a picture of it.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. My phone's turning on.
Jill Barbaries, 652 Orchard Street. I'm questioning the ordinance number 2, the red, and you keep talking about 445, but it also is 441. Both those properties affect my side yard, half of my side yard, and my entire backyard. So I'm that little spot right in the middle. That's my property right there, and I want to know what are the plans. 25 units at 445 is far beyond, but what are the plans for 441? I don't hear anything being said about 441.
Those are the 2 lots, right? 441
Right.
and 445. They're going to be combined. It's one development.
Right, but where do you know where the 25 units are going, or there's 40? I think there's 40 something parking spots.
Yes.
Have plans been made regarding? You keep, as I said, everything's being referred to 445, but what's going on with 441? Do we know? My property is right there. I'm surrounded by, in the back and on the side by these two.
Yes, so there were plans as part of the settlement agreement. We have them, I have them on the laptop. I'm trying to pull them up.
Can you move the mic, please? Sorry.
You don't, there's no, I mean, I have the plans on my laptop, so I don't know.
Settlement agreement was adopted by the
The
council.
the agreement was adopted by the council a month ago?
December.
December, 2 months ago. Trying to pull them up right now.
I'd like to mention in the ordinance, I read this, but now I'm going through it the second time. It does specifically state block 716, which is lots 14 and lot 15, which is 441 and 445 Kidderminster Road.
Yes, that's 441.
I can
And
show you, yeah.
it appears that there are specific items here that were negotiated by the developer and the municipality, and they came to an agreement, and this is now being approved in this ordinance. And we're just, at this point, from a planning board, reviewing the ordinance. I mean, it's not our ordinance. We're not here to make changes to it.
Okay.
And we're just here to ensure that it's consistent with the planning board's master plan. So that's our role tonight. And I can just tell you procedurally, when the applicant wants to build, he will, or she, or whoever, the entity, will want to come in front of a land use board for approval. And at that point, you'll have the opportunity to speak on behalf of the application. And there'll be a lot of specifics there.
Okay.
In terms of the size of the building and how it'll be situated on a lot and where the parking is going to be and the buffer zone. And you'll have the opportunity to...
This is my property right here, so you can see why I'm pretty upset.
Right, right.
Children, you know, being out in my yard, and now I have 3 stories next to me. And it's just...
I want to say that's a very good comment you made about anything that's in this plan and any ordinance that the governing body adopts. It doesn't mean that, there is going to be hammer and nails the next day. There are still public processes where there'll be a site plan application for any of these developments that would come before the planning board. There would be notice that would be required with that. It would be a public meeting, potentially multiple public meetings. So this isn't the end, it's just the step 1, let's put it that way.
Okay, because according to the letter that I received, it's 3 stories and 10 feet setbacks. That's about that far. Okay, thank you for listening.
Joanne Bunicor, Beverly Road. I'm looking at the 26-3. When you're saying that they changed the zoning, I'm a little confused on that. I've been following Subaru. I have a folder at home since 2016 on that piece of property, and how many times it has been, and it is contaminated or has been. There were houses also that this last time had to be addressed. But I'm confused that it was set up to be, I know the 2 developers that tried to come in the last time. It was going to be apartments, I guess you would say retail of some kind, and then they wanted an underground parking, which is totally ridiculous for that spacing down there. So how has that changed? Because it's still, isn't it going to still be the same thing? Are we talking the same?
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, somebody.
Go ahead, Caroline. No.
I'm missing it.
I'll let you, and I'll fill in if you miss something. But,
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm not an expert.
I think what you're referencing are the 2 zoning board applications, which were both denied. That's correct. One was for 29 units, if my memory serves me correct, and one was for 33 units. So if that's what you're referencing, I don't want to speak for you, but that's what you're referencing.
Right.
So what is happening now is there is a consideration of rezoning of this property because of what came out of the affordable housing process, not to allow anywhere near what would be allowed, what was being applied for. This is basically taking the existing CBD ordinance and putting it on this property. That's what that's doing, with a height limit of 35 feet, though, and 2 stories, as Mr. Latunas correctly described.
So they haven't taken away underground parking. Are they still talking that, or is that just up to that developer at that time who, that's what they want?
Let me rephrase, there is no developer involved in this
Right now,
process
right.
to,
Right,
to, at least to my
right.
knowledge, there's no developer. This
Okay.
property was referenced in one of the challenges, the objections to the June plan that Jeff described pretty thoroughly. And in working with the special adjudicator, with the court's expert, it was, the recommendation and the discussions were that this property should result in an affordable housing obligation. And since our June plan had put this in the overlay zone, instead of making it an overlay zone, just zone it for the what the CBD permits, so that that is a way to satisfy the obligation that is generated from the property. There's no developer involved, or there's no application or anything
Right now,
like that to
right.
my knowledge.
So let me just say, in the past or currently, before this ordinance is adopted, that's considered a B1 zone. I'm sorry, a B3 zone,
B3.
which is just office. And as an example, Hubcap Joe's went in front of the land use board, and they approved a liquor store with no residential. In the negotiation process, they wanted to change that zone area so that you have to have a residential component. And in the negotiations and in this ordinance, they're specific in stating it can only be 2 floors and et cetera, et cetera. And that basically is what we're reviewing at this point. The underlying zone is changing, which says you no longer can build something without a residential units that would contribute towards our affordable housing goal. And that was negotiated, and the adjudicator agreed to it, and the parties agreed to it. So that's kind of where we're at. Now, in terms of what goes there, how it's going to go there, that whole process will start once the developer wants to put together plans and review it with the planning, the land use board, whether it's us or the zoning board.
Now, the other thing, too, I have brought this up many times before, that piece of property, I know 3 feet, what is supposed to be the acceptable, or that property is set up to begin with. If you go down Kinderkamack Road and you look at that property and then look at the next buildings that are past Argyle there, that property then just goes down. So that property itself alone is already higher. And to put a 3, that's why I felt really bad when they were going through this with the 2 developers, the last time. Those 3 houses behind there will never see the daylight again, because going up, they're keeping to what the town, requires or whatever, or allows, but that property itself is already set up high. So those 3 floors or whatever they're allowed appears or will appear much larger. They will actually block out their daylight, that those 3 houses that are back there.
So just to clarify, the B3 zone, which the property is currently located in, has a 35-foot height requirement, and that's what the new zone district also allows. So I do recall these discussions from the zoning board meeting, but that height limitation of 35 feet exists today for the
I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that you changed or didn't change. I'm just saying I know that's what the town, but in retrospect, if you look at that particular piece of property, it is already set up. So when you're going the limit of what the town, will allow, that is going to appear. It will. How would I say? it will dwarf those 3 houses, you know, behind them. That's all. And that was like a big concern I had, you know, when they were going to do this. It's at a place. You know, if you look at the next buildings that, you know, are on Argyle, you know, cross over Argyle, you have the hair salon, and then you have the acupuncture building. They're all, it's not going to be, it will not be the same. So you're going to have a monster, and then, you know, it's just, the character is just being lost in Oradell, and I'm in Oradell 45 years. So it's very sad to see this going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other?
Vince Calcione. Mr. Serenian, can you explain what the court's position is on towns that would want to zone sections of a town for job creation, such as either commercial office development or light industrial rather than residential? Because I'm getting the impression from your description tonight that towns in New Jersey now, if you have any underutilized, you know, parcel of land or vacant land, they're aggressively pursuing residential affordable housing. And where does that leave the state and towns in the state who are looking at business, you know, job growth, and whether it's light industrial, whether it's commercial, where does the court stand on that?
Okay, you touched on 2 things, and I'll address both of them. The state doesn't say you can or you can't have non-residential development. The state says this is your number, and if you can satisfy it, you satisfy it. If you can't satisfy it and you seek a vacant land adjustment, there's protocols that you need to go through to say, well, you gave me a number of 200, but I only have enough land for 7, and there's protocols you can go through to show that you could only realistically provide 7 units with the amount of land that's available, and that's what we did. And then the state says, here's the rest, unmet need, and it establishes standards for the unmet need. In round 3, the standard for the unmet need is you just need a response. No one expected more. In round 4, there's now this requirement that 25% of the unmet need, according to Fair Share Housing Center, disagree with it, but according to the Fair Share Housing Center, they read the statute to say 25% of that unmet need for round 4, you have to have realistic zoning for. So it creates it's terrible legislation because it puts towns in an impossible situation. Like it's unmet need because it was always unrealistic to address it. But now there's a gun to your head that if you don't have realistic zoning for 25% of that, according to Fair Share Housing Center, you can get leverage by developers and can have something far worse than you could otherwise achieve.
So then, does that mean almost by default, if you have, let's say, a high unmet need number in your town that would otherwise want to zone something for other than residential, because of the unmet need, by default, the town has to go through to a residential use rather than, let's say, commercial?
Again, the law is simply, here's your number, satisfy it. And they're not really, they don't really care if you have non-residential or not. It's one of the problems with the doctrine. It's not balanced. It's, this is your number, satisfy it. And towns are under enormous pressure to do their best. And there's limits on what you can do. You can get adjustments, you can have different plans for your unmet need than your RDP. But like, for example, for us, we came in, you heard Fran describe what he had in mind for these properties. It's clear we couldn't get that, the court, we're not going to accept that. So we were forced to accept more than we thought was reasonable.
I would just add that the 4th round plan goes from 2025 to 2035. So this moment in time where we went through from January of 2025 through December of 2025, where we had to walk through this process that Fair Share kind of put together and the objectors, that's going to be that's not going to be how the process works for, the next 10 years until you get to around 5. So I don't necessarily, agree with the statement that town would then consider everything for residential, because you by doing all the things that we're doing this evening, and the mayor and council will do, you're protecting yourself, and the time frame and the window for the plan is a 10-year time frame.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lyrica Picard. That's my husband, Alex, and we live across the street from Jill. Actually, we just bought our house in October. So we are so surprised getting this letter in the mail. So I totally apologize if I'm going to ask any questions that don't pertain to this meeting. I think we just have a couple concerns. So we're affected by 445. We can see it directly across from our porch, where we see Jill play with her beautiful family and dog, who has an amazing house, and it's something we love seeing from our front porch. So we are concerned about resale value of our house, having worked our butts off, and our parents helped us to put a down payment on a house, and now just a couple months later to have this. And also environmental. I know that too much infrastructure can cause flooding issues, so we have concerns about that. So I think when you say settled with 445, does that mean there's no hope, or does it mean there's anything we could do to express that we are not in favor of the decision, or we should just kind of accept our fate, is what I'm wondering right now.
Well, there's a settlement with the municipality over what they can put there, the density and the generalities of the site. But as a couple of the people here tonight have suggested, when there's a plan, it's going to have to go before a board, and that's when people like you from the neighborhood or wherever can come and voice their concerns, and that may result in changes to the development that's proposed.
Okay, got it. So
it's also reviewed by all of the borough's professionals. For example, stormwater and flooding and things like that. All of that is done. Our engineers take a look at all of that and make sure that it won't increase those problems.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. NJDP, which has set kind of all the stormwater requirements, ensures and requires that any development that's constructed, the post-construction stormwater is better than pre-construction. So, and they'll have to prove that as part of the site plan application. So the worries about the stormwater and impacts that might have, that's something that you should not really be worried about, because they're going to have to prove that it's going to be better than the pre-development condition.
Like opposed to like just grass?
So they'll take the existing conditions, and as part of the site plan application, they will show how they're going to hold the water over time, how they're going to collect it all, so that in every instance, the post-development runoff will be less, and the stormwater will be less. So they're gonna have to prove to the board and to DEP that they're containing and holding all the water as opposed to it running off as it may have.
Okay, got it.
And then any type of DEP or other state requirements that, any type of rules or approvals, that still would also hold true. So as we indicated, there'd be the planning board hearing, and then, as Fran said, there'd be DEP approval, whatever needs to be done for any site. It doesn't get eliminated because of the fact that it's an inclusionary development with a settlement. That's process still needs to, will occur.
In any site plan application that occurs, you will be notified, because you're within 200 feet, so you will get that notification. You'll know when that's coming up. Those documents would be, at the borough for you to be able to see before the board meeting, and then you can attend the board meeting and provide, additional comments.
Okay, so it's been in the works for a while. We're just a little late to the party, kind of, or this is all new. Like the developers have bought those sites already. just because I'm so not familiar with the process. Sorry.
I think there is a developer for this particular site, unlike 66. I believe that there is a developer for this site. And so, yeah.
That's, I mean, the borough came to settlement with the developer or contract purchaser, I don't recall which, for this property, the 445, 441 Kinderkamak. They were a challenger. They objected to the June plan. They were one of the several developers that objected.
Yeah. Okay. I think I understand, but it's a little bit hard to grasp it all. So, okay. Thank you.
That's fine.
Sam Tripsis, 327 Maple Avenue. On June 24th, we had this exact same setting, and that's when I discovered that 445 was now in line to be developed, and I was a little surprised. Then only to find out that the second lot was also combined. You know, that wasn't even for sale. So that there was never a sign for that. So I feel that was an artificial purchase, you know, specifically to tear down, and with no consideration for the residential neighborhood and for historic purposes, being that the Fenner and Essler next door is a designated historic site. Putting in a 3-story building with 25, whatever, even it was going to be 40, but 25 is not a bargain. That's a high density piece of property that's going to cause a shadow on the residential neighborhood on 3 sides. I'm sensitive to that because I live on Maple, and we worry about that. And Maple abuts Kinderkamak Road just like this does. So I questioned it that night. How is it possible that got sacrificed? And I'm going to use the word sacrificed. You know, it was being discussed long before the public even knew. So the public couldn't even fight back. You know, here we are almost, you know, how many months later? It's painful. I understand the north corridor of Kinderkamak with the office buildings. You know, I mean, that's horrendous enough. But when you start affecting your residential neighborhoods, you're affecting quality of life. You know, and we worried about that. Like we have seven Queen Anne homes lined up on Kinderkamak from Center Street to where the restaurant is. And it was back in 2018 when we updated the master plan, 2017 and 18, we questioned that kind of, whenever you have an incompatible zone, what are you going to do? You need good setbacks. You need the right kind of development. And I requested, I said, is there a way to remove that from the list? Maybe doing a land swap like they would have done in the past. Prior mayors have done that to avoid that kind of development. You know, so it's very, very painful. 3 stories is going to be a shadow on the neighborhood. I don't know what else to say. And parking, too. Where are you going to put cars? With 25 units, is this going to be underground parking? 47 spaces? 42 spaces? Is this going to be underground? I know there's no...
Sam,
Yeah.
so 2 things. I want to correct one thing.
Yeah.
So there's no malfeasance in the board pulled something over the public's head back in June when we adopted the plan that we did. It was only until we filed that plan that the objectors came forward and said, I don't think your plan worked with the property I own, and here's what I'm proposing to do. To which at that point, through the mediation process, which we opted into, as a result of trying to maintain our immunity and having somebody come in an instance with this site, as of right, say, yeah, I'm putting 45 units here. I don't care if you don't like it, the law will allow me to do it, right? It's not an ideal situation. I mean, I've spoken, you don't need me to repeat my view on this whole process. I think it stinks. But as a result of the mediation, the 25 was where the adjudicator, supported the fact that we had some sort of an understanding with the developer that that was acceptable to all parties. We originally wanted to see, I think, 12 or 15. So, negotiations honestly don't always work out the way you would hope they would sometimes. But it wasn't until they objected to the plan that we were privy to what the idea of what they wanted to do with the site was. When it was sold, I can't speak to. It's a land transaction. That's not the kind of thing we're advised of, right? Other than the tax assessor's office and a change in ownership and who to send the tax bill to. So I can't speak to the developer's MO from when he acquired the property, whether it was the one lot, added the second lot, whether they wanted more lots. I can't speak to that. I can just speak to the fact that this came up as an objector to the plan we filed. This isn't what we'd like to see at all. It's kind of what we're stuck seeing. Because to say we don't want to allow anything here really wouldn't work out well for us in the process with the program judge or the vicinage judge. Lastly, I just wanted to address your question about the parking. The parking is handled within the footprint of the building. Right. To the best of my knowledge, it is not underground parking. It's grade parking.
If it worked. Because it's been discussed over the last couple of years about putting in an ordinance in that to prohibit underground parking. And I think you cover a lot by doing that. I imagine there's no interest in any of the boards to discuss it. But I've heard it from the public here. I've never brought it up, but I feel eliminating that would make create a less intense project. Also, 35 feet is what we have now. What I've heard in the last couple of projects, when we said, well, can't you reduce it one story? Well, here is it's a permitted use. Well, that's what you're doing tonight. You're creating a permitted use, and we can't fight back. At the Bank of America, we thought we had 2 stories. Then that would have been somewhat acceptable, except the developer said, sorry, they read our ordinances and our master plan through and through. But we thought in the spirit of all the discussion during the master plan, we wanted only 2 stories as the public. And we told the planning board just that. And instead it comes out the other side. It goes in through 2 stories and comes out 3, through the tunnel. But I didn't say there was malfeasance here, except that a developer has to know certain things, and sometimes they get help. And I've seen it over the years, especially in this property here. There wasn't going to be demolished. A tenant signed a lease for 15 years there to restore the barn on his own dime, to pay a certain amount of rent, and which he did. And it complemented this property next door, which is historic designated. This wouldn't have been designated historic, but it would have been part of the historic fabric. I'm just speaking up because sometimes things can be avoided. You just have to fight. You just can't say, well, you don't get anything good by sitting back and saying, "Oh, this is what we're dealt." So, but I won't go into the other properties. But 66 was another issue, and that's going to cause a shadow, as I heard, and that was all discussed. So, thank you.
I'd like to comment just real quickly for members of the audience. The purpose of this meeting tonight of the Planning Board is to review the ordinances and to review this fair share plan to ensure that it's consistent with the master plan. So while we don't have the ability to go in and make changes to the ordinance, and we don't have the ability to negotiate on behalf of the municipality and second guess what they negotiated with, we do review this to say, is this in line with our master plan? And I can give this property as an example. This property did not the way it's being agreed to is not exactly within the overlay zone in the central business district, but across the street on Kindercramack Road it is, and across Orchard Street on the same side of Kindercramack Road it is also. So, and in the 35 feet and the 3 stories is consistent with those zones. And those zones were developed in the round 3 affordable housing requirement, where the judge told us you have to provide overlay zoning, which is an opportunity for a developer to come in and build multi-use buildings to satisfy your need. And so that's what we did for round 3. And for round 4, we have to go even further. So we, as the municipality, and we're reviewing as a planning board, we were looking at our B3 zone, which is the southern section of town, and saying we should have the same B1 overlay zone there, so that we have, when we have development, we have apartments which attribute to our affordable housing requirement. They would be mixed use. And so our role tonight is just to say, while we don't get into the specifics, and most of that stuff will come out when the application comes in front of the land use board, is this consistent with the master plan? And so that's the purpose of the meeting tonight, is to review and approve what's been agreed to. So I don't know if that helps you at all. You know, we can't get into the specifics: underground parkings, buffer zones, height requirements. You know, all the things that come with an application, you know, will be negotiated by the applicant and the land use board when it comes in front of us. But from a planning perspective, and from a fair share housing agreement, you know, our role tonight is to ensure that it's consistent with our master plan. Paul, before you go up, is there anyone who would like to speak first? I would like to give them an opportunity. Okay, Paul.
Okay, we're discussing consistency of the master plan.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Well, the master plan, as you know, calls for a 15-foot buffer zone between commercial buildings and residential properties. And that means that this is not consistent with the master plan. So we want the change, instead of a 10-foot rear yard, 15-foot rear yard.
I think if you look at the master plan, it is 10 feet.
No. It's 15, and I've brought this up many times before.
You did.
Many times.
I think
it is 15 in the master plan. And nobody wanted to pass the resolution, and I asked for a resolution to be made, and I asked this at the last meeting too. At the last meeting, I says, you're making all these resolutions. This was the right time to change it.
Yeah.
And we didn't.
So we're discussing something very specific in terms of the ordinance is not exactly.
I know you are, but you want to be consistent with the master plan. That's why I'm bringing it up. Okay. And as far as the other thing is that with the 700 and the 800, where the buildings are lower because of the topography, well, this is just the reverse here on 66 and the other properties. It's just the reverse. So one side is a benefit, the other side is not a benefit. You know? So, and we can't do nothing about the 35-foot because that's in the master plan. But also in the master plan is the 15-foot buffer. So please, change that. And you'll be consistent. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else from the public that'd like to speak? I'd like to make a motion, then we close to the public.
Second.
Yes.
I'd like to thank everyone who came tonight and who spoke. Our next item is a motion to adopt the Oradell. We have an acronym here on the agenda. It is the
FSP?
Yes.
Amendment, Housing Element and Fair Share Plan Amendment?
The Housing Element Fair Share Plan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There are certain changes that we want to make.
Oh, are there? Okay.
So first of all, and my sincere apologies on this one, Mr. Depkin and Ms. Fereza were not included in the list of officials, and I want to, you should have a list of officials on second page. So we'd like to amend that to add their names where they, of course, rightfully belong.
So Carolyn, I'm happy to leave because I'm not listed here either for the planning board.
Yes, you are, under mayor.
Not under the planning board.
Not under the planning board. Well, this list, I apologize, this list came from the town. You will, and I'm not generally so personally involved in listed officials, but with Oradell I am. I will change that to mayor. I will add your name twice if you would like.
Little levity.
Thank you. That was one item, and the other item was on page 9. Page 9, there, this is it, right?
You want me to read it?
Go for it.
Okay. There's language here that's just clerical error. The sentence on the bottom of page 9 after the quote is, "The borough took the position the prospective deed obligation that has been adjusted," which is the language of the statute, "can only mean," it reads, "the unmet need for round 4." No. Our position was the realistic development potential for round 4. And then Fair Share Housing Center's position was you had to create realistic zoning for 25% of the unmet need for round 4. So all you need to do is change unmet need to realistic development potential in that first sentence.
We'll take care of those changes when we finalize the plan.
Just make sure I got this right. The first sentence is, the borough took the position that the prospective need obligation that has been adjusted can only mean the realistic development potential for round 4?
Right.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Any other changes, maybe? No?
Not a comma here or there, but nothing, you know,
Okay, nothing.
stylistic,
Okay.
not substantive or involving lists of officials.
Okay. Then do I have a motion to approve the round 4 Oradell Housing Plan and Fair Share Plan?
Chairman, can I just add
Sure.
something for a point of clarity? So while we're making a motion to adopt the revised plan, the council...
You're making a motion to adopt the amendment to the 2025 plan. That's what this is. It's an amendment to the plan.
So scratch revise with amendment.
Okay.
Well, we're voting on the plan. At the council's March 10th meeting is also a public hearing to address more specificity with regard to public comment on the ordinances that we were asked to review as the planning board. So there is more opportunity. The council is the body that has to adopt those ordinances on second reading after the public hearing, so I just wanted to make that point clear.
Okay. So do I have a motion? We are referring to the amendment to the housing plan element, Fair Share Plan, as amended with these last two comments to include borough officials, the mayor, and the sentence that we had discussed on page 9. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, we got a vote? Okay. Steve, can we do a roll call then?
Yes. Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Kang?
Yes.
Mr. Forte?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mayor Cook? Yes.
Thank you. Do we have to approve the ordinances?
Consistent or inconsistent with the master plan. And I'd actually request that you go through each of them individually and let Ms. Ryder give you her opinion as to whether or not they're
Okay.
consistent.
All right. Ms. Ryder?
Certainly.
I know that we reviewed these before, but can you
Yes.
just kind of give us your summation?
Absolutely.
In terms of our recommendation for approval?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. Are we doing 1 and 6 or no?
Do that, yeah, do it that way. I've actually prepared a resolution,
Your mic is not on.
I've actually prepared resolutions knowing, I spoke to Ms. Ryder earlier today, along with Mr. Serenian. So if you want to review the resolutions as she's going through the different ordinances, it might be easier.
I'm able to start while he's distributing, if that works for everybody.
Yes.
So the amendment to the housing plan was literally just adopted 2 minutes ago. All of these ordinances are necessary to implement the housing plan. They are referenced within the housing plan, and in my professional opinion, they are consistent with the housing plan. However, your land use plan, which is an element of the master plan, your land use plan does not, in my opinion, anticipate residential development at some of the locations that are included in these ordinances, such as 445 Kinderkamak, 66 Kinderkamak, the B3 zone, and 800, 700, and 690 Kinderkamak. Your land use plan is from, I believe, 2018. In fact, I know, Mr. Darian, you were highly involved, or actively involved in the preparation of it. The plan does reference conformance with, at that time, COA and other affordable housing regulations, but the land use plan does not, anticipate residential use in these locations. It is my understanding that there is a process going on where the master plan is being revisited and re-examined, and I do believe that there will be some, perhaps, rectifying of this situation. But Oradell, like many towns, needs to address the affordable housing obligation and timeframe that Mr. Serenian went through quite clearly at the beginning of this meeting.
So the resolution that I handed out for the two ordinances, 26-01 and 26-06, does find them to be consistent with the master plan, both sections of it, both the housing element and the land use element. The other four ordinances, unfortunately, are not yet consistent with the land use element of the master plan. That's why there's two separate resolutions.
So I have a question then, Mr. Gidling. We undertook a re-exam of the land use plan, of the master plan, and we published a draft document in June of last year. It's on the borough website because since 2018, when our last master plan was approved, the landscape has completely changed in the state of New Jersey. I mean, this landscape has changed across the country, but more specifically in New Jersey. And there are new factors or new forces that are affecting the borough from a planning board perspective than just the things that we were accustomed to prior to 2018. And within that re-exam document, even though it is not complete, we do address these areas where we have these ordinances. We do address the 445 Kinderkamak Road area. It's not exactly how these ordinances are, but it is in line with what is being envisioned here. When it comes to the commercial zone, the B2 zone, we recognize the fact that the property owners are dissatisfied and they were looking for changes to the use. And we have put in the re-exam document that we would consider that area of redevelopment. And I think that is identified in one of the ordinances also. That we can't just stick our head in the sand as a planning board and say those will remain commercial use only for the B2 zone. So at this point, since that document is a draft document, and we're being forced to make a decision for compatibility today, simply because the calendar, which is laid out by the state, forces us to. I mean, what's the recommendation here?
Well, that's actually addressed in the next resolution that I'll give you when you get to those sites. It says that the planning board has been conducting a review of the master plan, will be updating the land use element to be consistent with the housing element, and so there would be total consistency of these ordinances when you do make those changes. But you haven't, as you said, the planning board hasn't adopted them yet. So that's why technically I think, and our planner thinks that you have to find it inconsistent right now with the land use element.
You're finding it consistent with the housing element of the
Yes.
master plan, inconsistent with the land use element of the master plan, because the land use element of the master plan needs to be updated
Yes.
to reflect.
Okay, so procedurally, then we are going to just state, as I had stated,
Yes.
that this may be consistent with the housing element, which I think we're all in agreement with that. But technically, it is inconsistent with the land use of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll just have to live with that. So is it a dual vote? How are we going to handle this?
Yeah, well, ordinances 1 and 6 are totally consistent, so if you want to do those two first.
Okay.
And then do 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay. Give me one moment. I'm just getting my paperwork together before I want to. I think it's 1, which is Chapter 61. That's consistent, right? 4, you said, which is the B3 zone. That's consistent. And 6, right, which is the.
I don't think 4 was.
No?
1
and 6?
1 and 6.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can't seem to find. There it is. Thank you.
The more conservative approach.
Okay.
In this discussion.
Okay, thank you. So I guess at this point, I would entertain a motion for us to approve ordinances 2601, 266, as being consistent with the planning board's housing plan. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Housing plan or housing plan and master plan of land development?
It's the master plan.
The master
Finding
plan.
it consistent with the master plan.
I'll restate. I'd like a motion for ordinance 266 and 2601 to be consistent with the housing element and the master plan.
So moved.
Do I have a
It's
second?
the housing element and the land use element, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Should I use land use, Mom?
You should use both. It's consistent with the housing element and the land use element. That's what the resolution says.
Okay. So, sorry, I know that we called for a motion, but let's just dot our i's and cross our t's here. I'd like to make a motion for ordinance 2601 and 266 to be consistent with our, Mr.
Housing element and land use element of your master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano. Do I have a, do you have a second? I have it first?
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Depkin, can we call a vote?
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Kang?
Yes.
Mr. Forte?
Yes.
Darian?
Yes.
Mayor Cook? Yes.
Okay.
And they can find that it's consistent with the housing element, consistent with the land use element, and the land use element.
Thank you.
I think many towns are ignoring it.
I need to sign.
Okay.
All right, but make sure you photograph that. Because we had problems here with you and the lawyer because they shut the mics down.
So, there.
I think she got yelled at.
So the remaining items tonight that we're here to consider are ordinances 26-2, 26-3, 26-4, 26-5. And since they address areas, the commercial zone, 66 Kinderkramak, 445, and the expansion of the B3 zone, these are not specifically mentioned in the master plan, the land use element. So we are going to look to approve these ordinances, that they are consistent with the housing element of the master plan, but they're inconsistent with the land use element of the master plan. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Who made the motion?
The mayor. And the roll call, Mr. Depkin. This is for ordinance 26-2, 26-3, 26-4, and ordinance 26-5.
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Kang?
Yes.
Mr. Forte?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mayor Cope? Yes.
Okay. That was interesting. Next item is old business. Anyone have any old business they'd like to discuss?
Nope.
New business? At this point, I'd like to open this to the public for any item. If you want to speak, it doesn't have to be regarding the ordinances tonight. It could be just anything, but I'll just open it to the public for any comments. Having seen none, I'd like to close. I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn. All in favor? I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I know it's very procedural, but this is what we have to do. Thank you.
Yeah, remember.
Control of Iran's airspace and waterways without boots on the ground. We control their fate. But when a few drones get through or tragic things happen, it's front page news. I get it, the press only wants to make the president look bad, but try for once to report the